Hello, listeners, and welcome to this first Footnote episode proper. My name is Alex Sargent.
And I'm Chris Holliday.
Right, Chris, where are we going to start? It seems obvious. We're going to start with animation.
We are.
It was a toss-up between the coins, but you're going to take us away for the first go, yeah?
Yes.
Now, this is going to be a fun one, isn't it? Because you've got 10 minutes to explain exactly what animation is, the whole history of it, all the different types of it.
Sure.
And all I get to do is ask the questions. So I'm very excited. You look terrified.
No, I am, and I'm hoping that we'll have a kind of chat for about half an hour, and then you set the 10-minute timer. But I guess we should. We should launch.
I'm going to do it. Right, we've got 10 minutes ready.
Yeah.
Time starts now. Right, Chris, what's animation?
Okay, so animation, I think broadly speaking, is the illusion of life, the illusion of movement. It kind of comes from Latin, if we look at the kind of etymology and genealogy of the term animare, animus, the idea of soul, of breath, of life, of vitalism, the kind of vitality of characters and of objects. In terms of the genealogy of the medium itself, often animation historians go back to the sort of 1890s, and there are really the conjunction of three main areas. One is sort of Victorian childhood toys and the praxinoscope, these sort of images showing continuous movement written across in or drawn across in bands that are spun in essentially like flip books, spun in circular machines that then create the illusion of a horse riding or a person.
Right. I think I've seen, are those like the things in museums and stuff? You see them, it spins the wheel. And
yes,
you can,
yes. They're often one of the
like a flip book almost.
It is like a flip book. It's a lot of the adverts at the time. One famous advert when I've taught animation to students describes it as the wheel of life, which really kind of encapsulates, I think, what the transference of still images into movement can do. So I think that's a really important context. First off, Victorian childhood toys for children, which I think has done a lot in terms of branding the medium as something for children, which we might get onto in a potential Footnote episode later down the line.
Right, so were those things with a horse moving around? Yeah. That was a toy sold for like households?
Yeah. So you would get the strip separately, you'd weave it into this wheel of life, and you would spin it, and we get this kind of illusion of movement. Okay. Second, I think important context, and scholars like Malcolm Cook have written about this, is the lightning sketch vaudeville stage tradition. So essentially, an artist on stage with I guess a modern equivalent would be something like Pictionary. An artist on stage, or someone who's able to draw on stage with a chalk and an easel or a pen and paper or something like that, drawing and sort of describing what the artist is doing and modifying the drawing occasionally. Now, Malcolm's written about this in relation to the kind of lightning sketch tradition. They're also called chalk talk and sort of speed presto drawings. This staged performance where the artist draws an image and continually narrates his process, add bits, transforms the image to a live audience.
Okay, so that sounds like the two very different things in my head. Maybe I've got that wrong, but one is a kind of a technological optical illusion by a bit of kit is making the image, and one of them is a person live in a room basically doing some drawing and performing with the drawing.
But performance is key here. So I think Malcolm's work really speaks to that element of performativity, the way in which the artist is in a creative bargain with the thing that he's drawing, and out of that pattern and out of that staged performance where he kind of talks to the drawing, he may draw a bike that with a few additions becomes a tent, which with a few additions becomes a car, and it's that sort of interaction with the drawing that I think helped the illusion of life beyond the kind of mechanical image of a horse jumping up and down from artists like Edward Muybridge photographing these drawings of horses and spinning them around to create the illusion.
I'm making a mental note to cover performativity on another footnote.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got those two very different decisions. Where are we? We're in the late 18th century.
So this is kind of 1890s into the early 1900s. The third important context is comic books. So the first animated characters often have their lineage within print cartoons. So Felix the Cat is probably a really good example of that. And again, the aesthetic of the earliest cartoons mimicked the movement of left to right, right to left, that sort of comic book style tableau form of presentation, and really the convergence, the aesthetic of early animated cartoons in the 10s and 20s is really leaning towards the kind of mixture of the movement of life through this sort of Victorian context, I guess the lightning sketch tradition with drawings that could come to life, metaphorically speaking, and then the comic book style that all came together to provide kind of the animation with its earliest image repertoire.
So I guess it sounds like we've got a problem kind of working where this starts, like we do with all things, and that actually what you're talking about could even go back to like the southern French kind of cave paintings where you've got the horse, kind of the illusion of movement in the horse galloping along the cave wall and things like that.
Absolutely. And actually, one of the things that really, really preoccupies animation writers, historians, theorists, is this kind of question of genealogy, where, given that animation is often mired in it's live action's poor second cousin, it's not really talked about. It's a part of, I think, the reclaiming project of animation is to think about where animation comes from, what its roots are, and certainly kind of cave paintings where the light coming in from the real world would transform an image painted on a cave wall to give it that illusion of movement. You can definitely create a link between that, the earliest forms of image making, to kind of 1890s, and then we're into the 100 years of animation.
Well, we've got about half your time left, so tell us a little bit about the 100 years of animation.
Okay, so I suppose the first sort of 20 years of the 1900s was exactly that kind of short cartoon production, and then you get someone who we may have come across before, Walt Disney. He didn't invent animation, but he sort of defined it as a viable economic industry, and his earliest shorts are in the 1920s. By the end of the 1930s, we've got Snow White, and we're almost at Pinocchio and Bambi and so forth. Sure. At the same time, you have a sort of emergent, I mean, there are lots and lots of rival studios, the Fleischer Studios, the Herd Studios, the Bray Studios. Warner Brothers is perhaps the biggest competitor, and often the golden age of North American Hollywood animation is considered to be that sort of industrial give and take between Walt Disney and Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers producing the Looney Tunes, and I guess leaning more towards the 7-minute cartoon. Then we get MGM, we get Tom and Jerry, so we're already up to the sort of 40s and 50s.
Yeah. Are there any other types? Is this all drawn?
I thought we'd never ask. Yeah. So we are talking here about cel animation, and part of the reproducible, I think the kind of studio infrastructure that supported the golden age of Hollywood animation is partly due to the kind of reusing of cells. Cells could be washed, cleaned, and reused. In some cases, that wasn't even the case. Characters would be duplicated, backgrounds would be duplicated. So there's a sort of repetitious the repetitious act of Wile E. Coyote chasing the Roadrunner is repeated at an industrial level where the backgrounds are the same, and everything's going in these sort of Sisyphean cycles. It's the Fordist model of production. So we're talking really about cel animation. That was the sort of when cel animation was patented and industrialized, that's really what we're talking about. Of course, one of the biggest things with animation, like fantasy, as we'll go on to talk about, is that it's kind of splinters into lots and lots of different forms. We have cel animation, but we also have stop motion or object animation. So Aardman, perhaps a good example of a kind of claymation style of stop motion. We also have computer animated films.
I was going to say, we've also got to talk about the digital here.
Yeah. So they're sort of a rival. The digital has an interesting relationship to cel animation because digital ink and paint systems was used as a support for cel animation before it almost became spun off into an industry of itself. So the ability to produce persuasive, ultra-realistic, three-dimensional computer animated objects where you can sort of build a three-dimensional virtual world on a computer, and the result is kind of Toy Story. I mean, there's loads of other, going back to this sort of genealogy, what is animation, what isn't, how do we define it? There are other kinds, so sort of sand animations, so when artists such as Caroline Leaf create drawings out of sand and move the sand with her hands up against a sort of backlit a backlit to create kind of silhouette. We've got silhouette animation, Lottie Reiniger, in the 20s and 30s,
on the show before, haven't we?
Doing kind of cutout, again, against a backlight at home. So animation is all those things and many more that I think we'll go on to discuss. How are we doing for time?
You've got just under 2 minutes, so I'll tell you what, give me 30 seconds on why digital is it's probably seen by many as the most dominant now, and then you can give me some book recommendations.
Okay, so I would say since Toy Story, but actually really since the 2000s, what I really like and what I find interesting about the contemporary Hollywood and its relationship to animation is that it does seem to replicate the studio model of the 30s and 40s. I'd argue that the studio infrastructure in terms of creative personnel, workforce, artists working and hired under contract at particular studios, in the 30s and 40s is very much replicated when we think of Pixar, DreamWorks, Blue Sky, and of course Walt Disney. So I think there's a really sort of a nice mirror image between the studio system of the 30s and 40s and then a sort of contemporary explosion of blockbuster animation that's supported by a sort of big five of studios.
But plenty of other types of animation going on.
Oh goodness, yeah. My research is CG because I find it sort of fascinating and has its roots in special effects, of course. But yeah.
All right, give me some. We got 45 seconds. Give me some book recommendations if people wanted to learn more about the origins and types of animation.
Okay, so I would definitely suggest Maureen Furness's book Art in Motion, Animation Aesthetics, and probably one of the books that sits on my shelf that is the most dog-eared and kind of bleached by the sun would probably be Paul Wells's Understanding Animation. So published at the end of the 1990s and sort of offers a survey of animation theory, how we interpret it, full of accessible case studies. So kind of Maureen Furness's from an aesthetic point of view, Art in Motion, and then I would say Wells's Understanding Animation.
And if they wanted about computer animation, they would read...
well, there's so much, but I would probably say the computer animated film, Industry, Style and Genre by myself.
And then you have 2 seconds to breathe out.
Thank you.
There we are. Done. Well done. That was 10 minutes on the origins, histories, and types of animation. We'll do a few more of these on the different terms that have come up in that. But that's been this episode. If you've got any suggestions for future Footnote episodes, a question, a key term, a tangent on a previous episodes that we can do with exploration, fananim research, FANANIM research @gmail.com. And that's the same handle for our Twitter and Facebook and Instagram accounts. Otherwise, see you next time.
Bye.